Om Tavagatamratam Tapta Jivanam Kavivirididam Kalmashapaham Sharavanamangalam Shrimadatatam Bhuvigunanti Purirajana. Your words are like nectar, bringing life to scorched souls. They are praised by poets and remove all sin. They are auspicious to hear, wonderful and exalted. Those who spread these words throughout the world are truly giving souls. Welcome everyone. Last week I apologize for not being here. What actually happened was we recorded last week's session and there was some glitch and it really didn't get recorded, and by the time we found out it was too late, so we asked Swami Brahmarupananji to take over for the class. I'm sure you all enjoyed it with Swamiji last week. But I will go back and start where we left off from 2 weeks ago, which is on page 121. And this is the chapter, Advice to Householders. It is October 16th, 1882, and M, of course, is there. He's always there. And Narendra had brought 2 or 3 members of the Brahmos Samaj to the temple garden. And besides these, Rakhal, Ramlal, Hazra, and M were with the master. So it's Narendra and Rakhal, his 2 most illustrious disciples, we can say, and Ramlal and Hazra, who were both permanent residents there as priests or temple workers, and then M is there. We don't know exactly who the young members of the Brahmos Samaj are. We get the name Priya later. I'm not sure if he's one of them. Narendra and Rakhal were both members of the Brahmo Samaj, and presumably they at that time were already good friends. They had formed a friendship not simply because of the Brahmo Samaj. They attended the same gymnasium and did other things together, so they knew each other. It's possible that M didn't know that they knew each other. He doesn't mention too much about it. Rakhal, Swami Brahmananda, Rakhal came earlier. He was one of the first to come, and then Narendra came a little bit later. And of course, M was about a year after the 2 of them. Near the east door of his room, Narendra and the other devotees were gossiping. Narendra: how do you find the young men nowadays? M: they are not bad, but they don't receive any religious instruction. Narendra: but from my experience, I feel they are going to the dogs. They smoke cigarettes, indulge in frivolous talk, enjoy foppishness, play truant, and do everything of that sort. I've even seen them visiting questionable places. Well, I remember when I first read this, I found it so interesting that it doesn't matter what period of time we go back to, that there'll always be this attitude about the new generation, the younger generation, that we were very traditional in the way we grew up, and this new generation, that they're all going to the dogs. So it was the same even in Swamiji's time. M: I didn't notice such things during our student days. M is 9 years, we thought, older. He's 28, I think, at this time, and Narendra is 19, something like that. Narendra: perhaps you didn't mix with the students intimately. I've even seen them talking with people of immoral character. Perhaps they are on terms of intimacy with them. M: it is strange indeed. Narendra: I know that many of them form bad habits. It would be proper if the guardians of the boys and the authorities kept their eyes on these matters. It seems unusual, this young boy, Narendra. He seems to have views of a much older person and very conservative types of views. Usually young people are more iconoclastic and not so strict about things. And especially we know how independent Narendra was, so a little bit surprising that he has such fixed views about these things. They were talking thus when Sri Ramakrishna came to them and asked with a smile, "Well, what are you talking about?" Now Thakur is hoping that they're talking about God, of course, so he'll be a little shocked. Narendra, "I've been asking M about the boys in the school. The conduct of students nowadays isn't all that it should be." The master became grave and said to M rather seriously, "This kind of conversation is not good. It isn't desirable to indulge in any talk but talk of God. You are their senior and you are intelligent. You should not have encouraged them to talk about such matters." Now, we have to understand the context here, and we have to avoid the mistake of always trying to raise ourselves to the ideal that we find that Sri Ramakrishna is presenting to his young disciples, who were very, very special, all of them, M included, but we know that Narendra was the one to carry his message throughout the world. So there are two things. One is that this, I think, especially because they had come to Sri Ramakrishna, they were in that holy atmosphere, the Kali temple is there and everything. At least during this time, they should try to fix their mind on God and only speak about, spiritual things. The second thing is for us that we can't keep our minds on such a very high level all of the time. And I'll tell you very frankly, among even some of our great monks and sadhus that I know, they see nothing wrong with talking about politics occasionally or sports or other things like that. Many of our monks were great followers of these different sporting events. Swami Ranganathanandaji Maharaj, he was a great athlete himself and very interested. Swami Lokeshwaranandaji, he loved to follow cricket and everything, and so the light conversation like that among sadhus is even a type of holy company. I know, I felt this very clearly. One of our monks in Trabuco, whom I talk about sometimes, he was a great artist, Swami Atmajnanananda. He was also a big sports fan, and sometimes we would watch games together, we would talk about sports, but I always felt like it was holy company when I was with him, no matter what we were talking about, because that level of mind was always there in the background, and this was just some light type of break there. So no one should think that there's something very terrible about some type of light conversation. We shouldn't take it that far. If perchance we were to go to Dakshineswar to visit Sri Ramakrishna's room, to see the Kali temple, go to any holy place, come to the center, at that time at least we should avoid this type of gossiping and everything. But we shouldn't take it to mean that at no time should we engage in any light type of conversation. So he's scolding M. He's not going to scold Narendra. He's scolding M because he's the senior here. He says, "It isn't desirable to indulge in any talk but talk of God. You are their senior and you are intelligent. You should not have encouraged them to talk about such matters." Narendra was then about 19 years old, and M about 28, so 9 years in difference, more or less. Thus admonished, M felt embarrassed, and the others also fell silent. While the devotees were enjoying their meal, Sri Ramakrishna stood by and watched them with intense delight. That night the master's joy was very great. This was Thakur's dream, that for so many years he would pray to the Divine Mother, "Bring my devotees." Now others had come, and many wonderful people came. The Keshav and the Brahmo devotees had come, and before that some of the great Pandits had come, the Vaishnav Charan and others, but he knew deep down that these weren't the ones he was waiting for. And when the ones that he really knew would be those who could appreciate his words and what he had accomplished in his life, he knew that they would come eventually, and when they did start coming, he was filled with joy. And he always used to say that for someone who has experienced the highest type of samadhi, in order to keep the mind on a lower level, that something has to pull it down. And for Sri Ramakrishna, he used to say, Bhakti and Bhakta. These were the two things. That he wanted the company of the devotees, and he wanted to be able to experience the joy of devotion. So this was really his dream come true, to see all of these young devotees to start to come, those who would eventually renounce the world, and those like M, who would play an extremely significant role in this lila, in this divine play of Sri Ramakrishna. That night the master's joy was very great. After supper, the devotees rested on the mat spread on the floor of the master's room. This is what they would generally do. Just spread out some mats or some quilt or some blanket or something like that. If there's a pillow, they would have that, and that would be their bed. And they would do it sometimes after lunch just to take a little rest, and many times the devotees would stay. You would see mats on the floor in the room or on the veranda outside of the room, depending on if it was winter time or how many people were there, and who were the ones that Thakur felt were the real inner core. So sometimes he would say, you stay in the room, you can sleep here tonight. There would be 2 or 3 of them like that, and the others would be outside on the veranda. So after supper, the devotees rested on the mat spread on the floor of the master's room. They began to talk with him. It was indeed a mart of joy. The master asked Narendra to sing the song beginning with the line, "In wisdom's firmament, the moon of love is rising full." Now, we read in other places that Narendra only knew a handful of songs when he first came to Sri Ramakrishna, mostly songs from the Brahmos Samaj. He was not only a member, but they had a type of choir or chorus, something there, so he used to sing along with them. They had their own songbook, and of course he had a brilliant memory. So he could very easily memorize all of these songs. So Sri Ramakrishna had heard these before. He knew what songs that Narendra knew. So it's unlikely, this will be a Brahmos song. It's unlikely that Sri Ramakrishna had ever heard this song other than when either Narendra or one of the Brahmos came to sing it. This, we'll see, this is by Prem Das, which is, I believe, the pseudonym for Trailokya Sanyal. He was the main writer of songs at that time, quickly followed by Rabindranath Tagore. He was then 2 years older than Swamiji, 21, and had already started writing. Some of his songs are also included in the gospel. So Narendra sang, and the other devotees played the drums and cymbals. In wisdom's firmament, the moon of love is rising full, and love's flood tide in surging waves is flowing everywhere. O Lord, how full of bliss thou art, victory unto thee. On every side shine devotees like stars around the moon. Their friend, the Lord all-merciful, joyously plays with them. Behold, the gates of paradise today are open wide. The soft spring wind of the new day raises fresh waves of joy. Gently it carries to the earth the fragrance of God's love, till all the yogis, drunk with bliss, are lost in ecstasy. Upon the sea of the world unfolds the lotus of the new day, and there the mother sits enshrined in blissful majesty. See how the bees are mad with joy, sipping the nectar there. Behold the mother's radiant face, which so enchants the heart and captivates the universe. About her lotus feet, bands of ecstatic holy men are dancing in delight. What matchless loveliness is hers, what infinite content pervades the heart when she appears. "O brother," says Premdas, "I humbly beg you, one and all, to sing the mother's praise." They used to say that Thakur gave the gift of the name of the Divine Mother to the Brahmos. The Trailokyaнаth was one of the handful of Brahmos who really was influenced by Sri Ramakrishna and highly devoted to him, had great love and respect for him. Keshav, of course, that goes without question. They had a very, very sweet and intimate relationship. How Thakur loved him and how he prayed for his welfare when he was sick. Vijay Krishna Goswami, he was so inspired by Sri Ramakrishna that he eventually left the Brahmo Samaj, became a sannyasi, and had a big following himself. And this Trailokyaнаth, these three in particular, before meeting Sri Ramakrishna, most of the songs and chants and everything was directed to the infinite supreme Brahman, but we can say Saguna Brahman, Brahman with form, or not form, Brahman with attributes. They believed in formless God, but they could pray to this Brahman. So it wasn't exactly the Brahman of the of Advaita Vedanta, the Brahman of the Upanishads in a certain sense, because there's a little bit of that personal God in the Upanishads also, a little bit. And sometimes they would use the kind of generic term Hari in their songs. But then this Trailokyaнаth, he really got inspired by Swamiji. He's the one who wrote that beautiful song, Amai Dema Pagul Kore, Mother, make me mad with thy love. Thakur loved that song. So this divine madness, this calling on God as mother, these were gifts that Sri Ramakrishna gave to the Brahmo Samaj, we can say. Sri Ramakrishna sang and danced, and the devotees danced around him. When the song was over, the master walked up and down the northeast veranda, where Hazra was seated with M. The master sat down there. He asked a devotee, "Do you ever have dreams?" Hazra we met before. Huh? He had a family, and he lived in Dakshineswar. He had some type of renunciation or spirit of renunciation, either that or just some lack of interest in his family. And he had a debt. He had to raise some money to pay off that debt. He had an elderly mother back in the village. I believe he lived near Shihor, somewhere in the Kamarpukur area. His mother was always asking, please send him back to visit one time. And he never wanted to. Sri Ramakrishna would try to encourage him, but wouldn't force him. And he was a little argumentative. He considered himself a great jnani. He was big friends with Narendra. And everybody liked him. He wasn't a bad person. He didn't turn into a Hriday who really tormented Sri Ramakrishna at the end, but at times would criticize Sri Ramakrishna a little bit, and the disciples very much so, for not doing all the japa. He loved to do japa all of the time. So M was seated with Hazra. Then the master sat down there. He asked a devotee, "Do you ever have dreams?" Now I'm going to guess that this devotee is M himself. We don't hear that anybody else is there. It might sound strange. If he says he was seated with M, then why doesn't it say that he asked M, "Do you ever have dreams?" This is M's trick, of course, that he liked to keep himself in the background. He didn't like to identify himself. When it was something that he wanted us to easily understand was him, he would say M. Or Mashtar, they would say, Mashtar Moshai. He was a school teacher. That was the term that they used. Or Sri Ma, this M. If it was anything a little bit personal, then he would use a different type of name. Sometimes Manis, there were different names that he used, usually beginning with M, so another hint. So sometimes if he didn't want us to know it all, he would simply say a devotee. Usually we can guess. There are many times when he talks about his family problems and his wife's grief and the death of a child, And almost all of those times he'll use one of these other words. He won't make it very clear that it's him, but we can tell from the context. So I'm guessing that this is M himself. There weren't too many others there, and Thakur doesn't seem to have really known Narendra's friends very well. So this is my guess. Devotee. So I'm going to say that this is probably M speaking. Yes, sir. The other day I dreamt a strange dream. I saw the whole world enveloped in water. There was water on all sides. A few boats were visible, but suddenly huge waves appeared and sank them. I was about to board a ship with a few others when we saw a Brahmin walking over that expanse of water. We can guess perhaps Sri Ramakrishna himself. I asked him, "How can you walk over the deep?" The Brahmin said with a smile, "Oh, there's no difficulty about that. There is a bridge under the water." I said to him, "Where are you going?" "To Bhawanipur, the city of the Divine Mother," he replied. "Wait a little," I cried. "I shall accompany you." Now, you can come closer. There are a few things here. One is the devotee, and perhaps M, as I say, is not identifying this Brahmin. We will guess that it's Ramakrishna, or at least symbolically that we can say that it could easily be Sri Ramakrishna. Second thing is that going to Bhawanipur. Bhawanipur literally means the city of the Divine Mother, but it's also a section in Calcutta. I know this section very well. I stayed there on my very first visit to India. I lived in this Bhawanipur section of Kolkata for several months. A very nice place. We have one ashram there. Actually, the first ashram that was started in the city of Kolkata, as far as I know, Godadhar ashram. And you know who it's named after? Who?
Sri Ramakrishna.
Huh? Kumar? Sri Ramakrishna. No. There was a devotee who, just by coincidence, this is what I was told, was named Godadhar. And it was named after him. Of course, we can say it's because of Sri Ramakrishna also. So, in his dream, he's dreaming he's going to Bhawanipur. And so in dreams, things have symbolic significance. So probably in M's mind, this name, Bhawanipur, signifies the city of the Divine Mother. It can also mean that they're going to that part of Kolkata. It's hard to say. Master. Oh, I'm thrilled to hear the story. Thakur put great stock in dreams. He was always very, very happy when anyone had a spiritual dream. And he used to say that there's some people who are swapna siddha, that they actually attain illumination, perfection, enlightenment in dream. It is not a very standard type of doctrine. We hear that you have to be in this waking state, and in the dream we don't have any karma and this and that, but Thakur said no, even in the dream. And I think many of us understand that there are dreams that leave a very deep impression on us. If we have a spiritual dream, that we wake up and it has a lingering effect. Huh? It can have a very strong carryover effect on us. And so even years and years later, I've had very few of these things. I always wonder why. That here I'm trying to spend the whole day thinking of Thakur Maha Swamiji and everything, but just a handful of times. But the very few dreams like that I've had, still I can see very clearly. And they seem different from ordinary types of dreams. That they leave a very deep impression, as if it really, what we dreamt about really took place. We really experienced those things. So Sri Ramakrishna put great stock in these things. Even psychologically, we can say it's a good sign to have these type of dreams, but from a spiritual point of view, it's definitely helpful for us. So the master says, "Oh, I'm thrilled to hear the story." Devotee. The Brahmin said, "I am in a hurry. It will take you some time to get out of the boat. Goodbye. Remember this path and come after me." Master. "Oh, my hair is standing on end." Then he says a very curious thing. "Please be initiated by a guru as soon as possible." Now, if it's really M, is he actually telling him to go someplace else? Of course he won't do that. But Sri Ramakrishna had a great aversion to this feeling of being a guru. Many times, if people would say, oh, he's your disciple, then Thakur would say, I have no disciple. No one is my disciple. That I am, he would say, Reno Renu and Dashanu Das. I am the dust of everyone's feet. I am the servant of the servant of the servant. That type of humility. And we know that he couldn't bear these three different terms, Guru, Baba, and Karta. Guru, Baba, and Karta. Baba is a term that was used very frequently for these Vaishnava holy men, meaning father, but in a very respectful way that would only be used for a holy person. And Karta could be a master, even somebody, an employer, or somebody with great power. So he said, I feel like I'm being stung by a poisonous fish, horned fish. There's some blowfish type of thing. When I hear these different words, they prick my skin like that. So he didn't like that idea of considering himself a guru. See, I said all of these things last week, so I'm repeating myself, but nobody knows that I'm repeating myself, except Kumar and Tungadi. He used to say, Guru Giri, Besha Giri. That is a type of prostitution. That being a guru and accepting money and doing it just for name and fame and possessions and things. We know that there are gurus that collected how many? Over 100 Rolls Royces. Huh? Remember, in Portland, was it, or something like that? Now, the other thing is that there's a whole tradition of householder gurus in this. These Kula Gurus, and especially the Vaishnava tradition, the Goswamis, that Thakur had tremendous respect for. He's not referring to that. That was their family line. That's what they did. And when Thakur would see these Goswamis, who were generally gurus, he would treat them with tremendous respect. And this is how they had to earn their living. They wouldn't take other types of jobs, so they had to rely on gifts from those whom they initiated, those families. They would do puja and things for them. So it doesn't refer to them. He's really talking about those who take advantage of it. They make a profession out of it. But if we want to interpret these things, please be initiated by a guru as soon as possible. I would say that he's telling him, now you're ready. And that he's the one who will have to be his guru. There's no other choice that way. Shortly after midnight, Narendra and the other devotees lay down on a bed made on the floor of the master's room. So after their meal, they took a little rest, and now they're going to sleep for the night. Sleeping for the night for Sri Ramakrishna meant 1 or 2 hours. And very often he would awaken the others, or if he let them sleep, by the time they woke up, usually when the sun came up, they would see that he was already up and in ecstatic mood, and clapping his hands and going around the room doing all of these things. Sometimes he would wake them up in the middle of the night. They would go to sleep for an hour or so. He would wake them up and he would say, what are you doing? You're wasting the whole night. Sit up for meditation. And he would give them some instruction. Sometimes he would go and fix their seat. If they were slumped over a little, he would straighten them up. And that way he would teach them how to meditate properly. So he was very kind to them this night. He let them sleep a little bit. It says, at dawn, some of the devotees were up. That means at least M was up. He has to be up in order to write this. They saw the master naked as a child. Now, those not familiar with the culture of the day in India at that time find these things kind of unusual. Why should he be naked? For Sri Ramakrishna, keeping his wearing cloth on was a big nuisance. It's not easy. The way they would tie the cloth where you had to take it around and then through your leg and do all of the folds and everything. And Thakur could never figure out the last portion of it, so he threw it over his shoulder. And it can easily come off. They didn't use belts or anything like that. And it was just a nuisance for him. And so while he's sleeping at night, he's rolling around at night and not concerned about it, and not even aware if it's on or off. And holy men in India, it was a very common sight to see them going naked. Nangta, Thakur's Vedanta guru, Nangta means the naked one, Totapudi. So there's a long tradition of that. Nobody thought that it was anything very unusual. They thought it was sweet because it showed how childlike, like little kids in India. You see them all over playing in the streets and everything, but not a stitch of clothing on. Maybe a string around the waist, a little bead, something like that. And nobody thinks anything of it a hot country. So for little kids, of course, it's natural. So for Sri Ramakrishna, it was always understood that this was a childlike nature and absolute indifference to what other people thought of him. There was something called Shabhota, that will he be considered a civilized person, cultured person. He didn't care in the least for that. You know, he got in trouble with Debendranath Tagore, that they had invited, the Tagore family had invited him to a Brahmo festival, but they said, please see that you at least wear a shirt when you come. So Thakur said, I'm not even aware of the time of day or this or that, or if my clothes are on or off. I can't promise anything like that. So Tagore said, Rabindranath, the father, he said, it will pain us very much if other people criticize you for that. A very calculating type of statement to make. What he really meant was, don't dare come if you're not dressed properly. It's not that we care that you'll be criticized, that we may be criticized, letting this person come in like that. It wasn't a very straightforward type of answer. And then Thakur went back, and a couple of days later he got a letter saying, don't come. he was disinvited to that particular festival. So they saw the master, naked as a child, pacing up and down the room, repeating the names of the various gods and goddesses. This was his daily habit. His voice was sweet as nectar. M used to say that he never heard a voice as sweet as Sri Ramakrishna's voice. Second, he used to say, Swami Parameshananda. Paramesh Maharaj, Holy Mother's disciple, who wrote all of those beautiful songs. And then after that, Swamiji. Swamiji's voice, we hear, was a deeper baritone type of voice. And he also was an expert and trained, so he could do classical also and everything. But Sri Ramakrishna said he never heard a voice as sweet as his. Of course, a lot of it is that bhav, that mood that Thakur was in when he sang. Now he would look at the Ganges. Yeah, Thakur always had great devotion for the Ganges. Now stop in front of the pictures hanging on the wall and bow down before them, chanting all the while the holy names in his sweet voice. He chanted, Veda, Purana, Tantra, Gita, Gayatri, Bhagavata, Bhakta, Bhagavan. Referring to the Gita, he repeated many times, Tagi, Tagi, Tagi. This was, of course, the teaching that he got from Totapudi. Thakur used to say that when we study the scripture, we have to just get the essence of it. And the essence can be something very simple that can be expressed in one or two words. So we said, what is the real meaning of Gita? Totapudi used to say, what you get by repeating the word Gita, 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 becomes Tagi, which is close enough to Tyagi, or Tagi in Bengali, that it means, Tyagi is a person of renunciation, Tyaga. So he said the real meaning of Gita is renounce everything for the sake of the Lord, is renunciation. So Thakur would repeat this word also, Tagi, Tagi, Tagi. Now and then he would say, O Mother, thou art verily Brahman, and thou art verily Shakti. Thou art Purusha, and thou art Prakriti. Thou art Virat, thou art the absolute, and thou dost manifest thyself as the relative. Thou art verily the 24 cosmic principles. Now, there's a little bit of a philosophical truth here, and something that separates Sri Ramakrishna's understanding of Shakti from the normal understanding of Shakti. We normally, when we refer to Shakti, we're talking about that divine power, which is inseparable from Brahman. When Sri Ramakrishna speaks of Shakti as the Divine Mother, or speaks of Kali as the Divine Mother, he's not talking about that one aspect of Brahman, he's talking about Brahman together with that aspect. So, this is why he said to Narendra, what you call Brahman, I call Kali. But then he would add, but this is Brahman, not simply this Nirguna Brahman, this is that Brahman, both Saguna and Nirguna, both with attributes and beyond everything. And he said the distinction is when I speak of it as mother, then we're thinking in terms of this power of creation. The Divine Mother will be Ishvara, and this Ishvara is not something separate from Brahman or different from Brahman. They're one and the same. This I always like this idea that I heard many times from Swami Swahanandaji, that the woman giving birth to the child becomes a mother. Before she has the child, she's a woman. After she has a child and becomes a mother, she's still a woman. The woman aspect is always there. That's Nirguna Brahman. The motherhood aspect of it will be the Shakti aspect of it. This will be manifest when the creation is there. So the creator is only a creator when there's a creation. If there's no creation, the creator doesn't disappear. It remains as it was before, which is Brahman. Nirguna Brahman. So Thakur, he's saying that mother, you are Brahman and Shakti both. He's not saying, mother, you are the Shakti that belongs to Brahman. He said, you're both. So when he's talking about the Divine Mother, he means this complete highest conception we have of reality, which is with form, without form, which is with attributes, without attributes, which is personal, which is impersonal, which manifests as the whole universe. So he also says, you are the absolute. This will be the Swarat, that which is beyond everything, transcendent. And you manifest as the relative, the Virat. So both Prakriti and Purusha, that means this absolute and nature, or all men and all women, and the 24 cosmic principles. What are the 24 cosmic principles? Kumar. Okay, the 5 senses of knowledge and the 5 senses of action, the 5 elements and the 5 subtle elements, tanmatras, that's 20, and then buddhi, manas, ahankara, chitta, that'll be 24. There are slight variations in different lists that we have, but basically this is part of the Sankhya philosophy. In Sankhya, these don't belong to Purusha or Brahman, they belong only to Prakriti. This is the ultimate distinction between Vedanta and the Sankhya system. That Vedanta will accept Sankhya up to that point where it says that these are 2 separate categories, Purusha and Prakriti. But Sri Ramakrishna is saying that no, the Divine Mother herself is manifested as the 24 cosmic principles. That means all the building blocks of nature. In the meantime, the morning service had begun in the temples of Kali and Radha Kanta. These are the 2 temples, and then other than that there are the 12 Shiva temples with all different, each one is a different name to the Shiva Lingam, but they all look more or less the same. Sounds of conch shells and cymbals were carried on the air. The devotees came outside the room and saw the priests and servants gathering flowers in the garden for the divine service in the temples. From the Nahabat floated the sweet melody of musical instruments befitting the morning hours. The Nahabat is the building just north of Sri Ramakrishna's room. When Thakur's mother came, she lived there. when the Holy Mother came, and she lived on the top, the top floor. Holy Mother lived in the downstairs. It was very small, of course. You can barely lie down, and very often she had a companion staying with her, and she did all of the cooking there, and they had to hang all of the vegetables and even live fish and things there, and this is where she lived. And had to bend over very far to just get inside. She used to bang her head every once in a while. She would forget. And she had, so anyhow, that's no, but when nobody was living there, it really wasn't meant for people to live there. It was meant for the musicians to be able to climb up the steps to go to the top, which is kind of like a tower, and from there they would play their instruments, usually Shenai, and along with that, whatever else, tabla and other things go with it, but usually Shenai. It was very, very haunting and beautiful. I love this Shenai music when you hear that, especially at these festival times. I remember the very first Durga Puja that I went to in India, in Kolkata. This was in 1972, in Bhawanipur. In the Kolkata, other parts, of course, of India, but there almost not every street corner, but every little small neighborhood. Outside they'll set up, there's a pandal and with the images of Durga and Shiva and the whole retinue, the family. And very often there'll be performances and things. And that was the first time I ever attended a Shenai concert. And it was just beautiful. We've never had it here or anything. Generally, there's more emphasis on, and maybe it takes more skill, I don't know, on sitar and the other instruments like that. Nowadays, violin. But the Shenai is really beautiful. Narendra and the other devotees finished their morning duties and came to the master. What are morning duties? You brush your teeth, you wash your face, you answer a call of nature, whatever you have to do. It's not really duties. Prata kritya, they call it. And just taking care of the morning stuff. And came to the master with a sweet smile on his lips. Sri Ramakrishna was standing on the northeast veranda, close to his own room. Narendra, we noticed several sannyasis belonging to the sect of Nanak in the Panchavati. Now, I should research these things because we come across this very often in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, even though we rarely think and rarely see sannyasis belonging to the sect of Nanak will be Sikhs. But if I remember correctly, there was one branch, and maybe it was one of Nanak's sons, one branch, and if anybody knows, has this information, please send me an email or let me know somehow. I think they were called Udasis, that they took to monastic life, and there's some very important teachings that Thakur says. I don't remember which one it was, Narada Bhakti or something, that he used to call them Nanak Panthi sadhus, that he learned from one of them. So it wasn't that uncommon. And Sri Ramakrishna, he had a lot of association with the Sikh community because many of them went into the military. This was natural. They were really the military of India. They were from the Kshatriyas. They were the protectors of India. So many of them joined the army. And since Kolkata was the capital of the British Raj, many of them were stationed there. And there was cantonment. There was a place in Barakpur where many of them lived. And just north of the Dakshineshwar compound, there was a wall, and on the other side was where they kept arms, their ammunition and everything. So many of the Sikhs would come and sit by Thakur's side, and they loved him, and he was very, very fond of them. And in Dakshineshwar, any sadhu or any holy person or even any beggar, anybody who needed a place to stay, they could go and they could stay there. And they could get food there. So it was a great meeting place for all different spiritual seekers and different monks from all different traditions there. Thakur had a great desire one time to feed all of them and to make provisions so that all of them could have. Sometimes they would take foodstuffs and make it themselves. Otherwise, they could go. There was a kitchen attached to the Kali temple and one attached to the Radhakanta temple, one for vegetarian, one for non-vegetarian. So they had that option also. So Narendra said, we noticed several sannyasis belonging to the sect of Nanak in the Panchavati. Master, Panchavati we know is where Thakur performed so much of his spiritual practice. He himself planted the trees there. There are 5 different trees that are there. Unfortunately, most of them died and then one rotted out and there was a bit of a fire. I think they've replanted the banyan tree so that there'll be at least one there. But otherwise, everything from the original Panchavati is gone. Master, yes, they arrived here yesterday. To Narendra, I'd like to see you all sitting together on the mat. So he doesn't especially want to bring up these sannyasis or invite them there or anything else. He really wants to concentrate on his disciple Narendra. Rakhal must, I don't know if Rakhal is still there or not. Possibly not. Possibly just Narendra and the 2 Brahmo friends, which doesn't seem to include Rakhal, because he'll speak mostly to Narendra. So I'd like to see you all sitting together on the mat. As they sat there, the master looked at them with evident delight. He then began to talk with them. Narendra asked about spiritual discipline. Master, Bhakti, love of God, is the essence of all spiritual discipline. Through love, one acquires renunciation and discrimination naturally. Now, we generally think of Narendra as a jnani. That he was the one with a gigantic intellect. And we also see that Sri Ramakrishna felt that he was perhaps the only one of his disciples, or one of the very few, who was really fit for this Advaita Vedanta. And at that time, since Narendra was a member of the Brahmo Samaj, his view of the Brahman was not this Advaita Vedantic view, and they didn't stress this idea that this world is like a dream, or even this idea that everything we see is Brahman. And when Sri Ramakrishna would say those things, he would think, what an odd thing to call this table is Brahman, this chair is Brahman, this pot is Brahman, this pitcher is Brahman. We know the very famous incident when he's talking with Hazra, and Thakur asks what they're talking about, and he says all of these things, and they're laughing, and Thakur says, oh, is that it? And he touches him. Swamiji has all of these experiences, and then it lasts for several days. And afterwards he said that, now I understand the experience that these rishis had when they said that everything is Brahman itself, because he had that experience. But Sri Ramakrishna also felt that Narendra had this quality of a devotee. And he used to say, look, he doesn't have the dry look of a jnani, that he has the eyes of a bhakta. And Swamiji himself used to say, others also, that Thakur was all devotion on the outside and all knowledge on the inside. But Swamiji was the opposite. He was all knowledge on the outside, but he had the tender heart of a devotee, very, very tender heart, Swamiji. So Sri Ramakrishna was trying to develop Swamiji into a very all-around type of person, where there's equal development of head and heart, of bhakti and also of jnana. So here he's stressing this idea of bhakti. Now the Brahmos, I don't know how they looked upon themselves. They probably thought that they were all intellectuals. But Thakur always said that you're bhaktas. When he would talk about this, sometimes he would talk about the path of knowledge as a little dry, and especially to the Brahmos. He said, but you're not like that. You're bhaktas. They did have a devotional attitude. This is a curious thing. There's a Brahman of the Upanishads is not usually thought of as the object of devotion. We try to realize Brahman. But the Brahmos try to combine these two things, where they would pray to this Brahman as father, almost like the Western traditions of Judaism, Christianity, Islam. Formless, but with qualities of love and mercy and justice and things like that. So, Thakur was saying to Narendra, Bhakti, love of God, is the essence of all spiritual discipline. Through love, one acquires renunciation and discrimination naturally. So, Sri Ramakrishna is saying that these are the two important things. That one has to have renunciation, that means detachment, a spirit of surrender, giving up this idea of the ego, that everything is up to me, and discrimination, that means being able to tell what's important in life, what's real and what's transitory, what's substantial and what's hollow in life, what is ultimately the one unchanging reality, and everything else that's passing show. So he's saying through the path of devotion that one gets these things naturally. Now, how does it happen? This renunciation, if we have a devotional relationship with God, then we want to give up everything for God, do everything for God. Everything is to be done as an offering. And this discrimination, then we realize that that's the only thing that's of value in this world. So that type of discrimination will take place naturally. Narendra, isn't it true that the Tantra prescribes spiritual discipline in the company of woman? Now he's raising a topic that Sri Ramakrishna won't be very happy with. Why he raises it, in those days there was a little curiosity about these things. Not that Narendra had any real interest in it. He likes to see what type of answers. He tested Sri Ramakrishna a lot to see what type of answers he would get. Master, that is not desirable. It is a very difficult path and often causes an aspirant's downfall. There are three such kinds of discipline. One may regard woman, there's a footnote, woman is the symbol of the Divine Mother. These, of course, are all things that have relevance to male devotees. That everything can be switched. For the women, they also will do this type of practice where they'll find a man. But generally, these were things, unfortunately, there was always this bias towards men in the scriptures, which is not limited to the Vedantic Hindu tradition. It's in every tradition. So, one may regard woman as one's mistress. So this is something similar to the Madhur Bhava that we have Radha and Krishna, but from the Shakta point of view. Or look upon oneself as her handmaid. This will be like the Sakya Bhava, as the friend or attendant. Or as her child. This will be the reverse of the Vatsalya Bhava. One looks upon God as the child. This is to look upon oneself as the child, and God as the mother. I look on woman as my mother. So that means both. He looks upon the Divine Mother. He feels that he's a child. He has that child relationship with the Divine Mother, and he looks upon all women as his own mother. To look on oneself as her handmaid is also good. He did this for, I think he said 2 years. He did it for a long time. He lived in the house of Mathur Babu and his wife, I think in Jan Bazar. And there he would really look upon himself as a female companion of the Divine Mother. He would dress as a woman. He would dress the image, put ornaments on, and all the women devotees, they felt as if he was one of them. And he would wave the fan and do all of that. And he used to say that this is one way for men to get rid of this idea of, to get rid of lust for one thing, but also this idea of this identification with one's manliness. That it helps one understand that the real self, there's nothing male or female about it. that this is just some type of identification. We can identify with the female side as well as the male side. But it's also a way to develop this tremendous feeling of devotion and service to the Divine Mother. So to look on oneself as her handmaid is also good, but it is extremely difficult to practice spiritual discipline looking on woman as one's mistress. This is something that was done, as I say, both in the Vaishnava tradition and in the Shakta tradition. And it was very, very easy and very often happened that it led to very unhealthy results. To regard oneself as her child is a very pure attitude. This was Thakur's attitude. He used to say Shantan Bhav. He would say there's a very pure attitude because and selfless attitude also, and an attitude of perfect surrender and perfect reliance on God, just as the small child relies on the mother. The sannyasis belonging to the sect of Nanak, so the ones that Narendra was talking about, entered the room and greeted the master saying, Namo Narayanaya. Sri Ramakrishna asked them to sit down. This is a very common way that all sadhus can greet each other. It's a non-sectarian. We may say Narayana, it's a Vaishnava way of doing it, but no. It's just like Hari. Hari we identify with Vishnu, but it's generally taken just as a generic type of term or non-sectarian type of term. So any sadhu meeting another sadhu can say Namo Narayanaya, salutations to the Lord. Sri Ramakrishna asked them to sit down. Master, nothing is impossible for God. So now he's speaking to all of them. He'll be speaking to these sadhus as well. Nothing is impossible for God. Nobody can describe his nature in words. Everything is possible for him. This is a very important theme and something that I find especially helpful for those who worship God as Mother. And this was one very important distinction between the Vedantins and the Shaktas. The Vedantins, Shankaracharya and others, will try to find an explanation for everything. Even though sometimes the explanation is Maya, which makes it a little cloudy, is it really an explanation or not? But they'll try to explain things, they'll use yukti, they'll try to use reasoning very much. The Shaktas, on the other hand, are very, very happy with it just saying that, no, it's mysterious. Who can understand who Mother really is? Ke Jani Kali Kamon. There's so many beautiful songs like that. There's the Kamalakanta song, Shamamaki Amar Kalore, with Swamiji's last song that he sang. I love this line at the end. Though I have pondered all of my life, I hardly know who Mother is. Now she appears as Prakriti, now as Purusha, now as man and now as woman. Now she is white, red, yellow, all the different colors. I've been trying to figure out this mystery my whole life. And even now, at the end of my life, I throw up my hands and say, who can understand who Mother really is? And then that Ram Prasad song is like we're just as simple children trying to grab. We see the moon, it looks so close, we can reach up and grab hold of it. But of course, it's so far beyond our grasp. So to comprehend the Divine Mother with this little mind that we have is very far beyond our ability. So Thakur liked this idea. And he very often would just tell people, look, you're trying to pour 5 gallons of milk into a 1-gallon container. It can't be done. The mind is finite, and it deals with everything within the realm of time, space, and causation. We're talking about this infinite absolute. It can't be done. Don't spend your whole life trying to answer these questions. How does the one become the many? How does the creation come from pure consciousness? All of these things. These are mysterious things. Master, nothing is impossible for God. Nobody can describe his nature in words. Everything is possible for him. And I would say in the English translation, to me it sounded better, everything is possible for her, because in his mind he's really thinking of the Divine Mother most of the time. When he's talking about God in general, most of the time his conception of God is in terms of the Divine Mother. Even though it is not restricted to that, he can be thinking of God as Shiva and everything, but that's generally in the back of his mind. There lived at a certain place 2 yogis who were practicing spiritual discipline. The sage, Narada, was passing that way one day. Realizing who he was, one of the yogis said, "You have just come from God himself. What is he doing now?" Narada replied. Narada he had this ability to go back and forth between the earth and Vaikuntha. He was big friends with Narayana, with Vishnu. "What is he doing now?" Narada replied, "Why, I saw him making camels and elephants pass and repass through the eye of a needle." At this the yogi said, "Is that anything to wonder at? Everything is possible for God." But the other yogi said, "What? Making elephants pass through the eye of a needle, is that ever possible? You have never been to the Lord's dwelling place." At 9 o'clock in the morning, while the master was still sitting in his room, Manomohan arrived from Kolnagar with some members of his family. In answer to Sri Ramakrishna's kind inquiries, Manomohan explained that he was taking them to Calcutta. The master said, "Today is the first day of the Bengali month, an auspicious day for undertaking a journey. I hope everything will be well with you." With a smile, he began to talk of other matters. We'll stop here, and we'll begin with this paragraph, because I want to say a few words about this Manomohan. He plays a very, very significant role for 2 things that he did. One is that he married his daughter to Rakhal and became very close with Rakhal, and is the one who brought Rakhal to Sri Ramakrishna. Rakhal didn't come through the Brahmos or anything else. It was through his father-in-law. And his father-in-law was such a devotee that he didn't seem to really mind too much that Rakhal stayed with him and eventually took sannyasa, even though Rakhal had been married to his young daughter. Second thing is that he was a cousin of Ramchandra Datta, the other great householder devotee of Sri Ramakrishna, and he's the one who brought Ram to him. And Ram was also in a very disconsolate mood. I think a daughter had died or something. I don't remember, something like that. So we'll start with that next time. And we will close now with our final chant. Om Niranjanam Nityamananta Rupam Bhaktanukam Bhathurada Vikraham Vai Ishavataram Parameshamidhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namamaha. We bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for his devotees, who is an embodiment of the Divine and the Supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Okay, thank you everyone, and I look forward to seeing you next week.